So reports came out a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of brushed over it because I didn't think much of it. And now, the more I've been thinking about these new teams in the Big 12, the more I've been thinking about how the Big 12 expands further. Clemson, and there were some things that I missed with this, with Clemson basically saying, hey, look, with a source saying Clemson could leave the ACC sooner rather than later. That's how I'll put it. According to On3, current ACC schools locked until 2036, but there are ways, like Florida State thinking maybe there's been fraud committed. There are ways here that the ACC teams could get out of this. Clemson official per Sports Illustrated spoke out and said the possibility of leaving with Florida State and UNC, there's strength in numbers if we're not the only ones, if we're not the only departing ACC school doing the negotiating. If Florida State, Clemson, if UNC come to the table, pull their pants down, lay it all on the table and say, hey, look, this is what's going to happen. Can tell you how that's going to go. They got the staying power. Notre Dame's acting like it's the one that calls the shot in the ACC. Maybe they, to an extent, yeah, they kind of got to push some people around to the ACC. I think Clemson's kind of over. I think Florida State's over. I think UNC's over it. They all voted against having SMU. Remember, we forget here. This team in Dallas, SMU, Southern Methodist University, the Mustangs, are paying their own way into the ACC. That's embarrassing. Desperate. Leaving their conference, hoping for the best in the ACC, funding it themselves. And if the ACC falls apart, I don't know where SMU goes. Now they got to their magic number. They got to their magic number of 18. So if they lose 3 members, UNC, Duke, and Miami, UNC, Duke, UNC, Clemson, and Florida State. We'll get to Duke and Miami in a second. If they lose those 3, UNC, Clemson, Florida State, then at that point, the 15, they're like, all right, the TV deal stays put. But you think Duke's going to be cool with that? There's where Duke comes. You think Miami's going to see Florida State leave and be like, oh, yeah, we're good. We're going to stay. You think they see their brand so much worse off than a Clemson, than a Florida State, that they would let those teams go and just say, all right, fine. We're just going to be Miami in the ACC. No. If you're the Big 12, if you're Brett Yormark, well, you could still, we've talked a lot about Washington State, Oregon State. You could still do that. But now if you're a UCF fan, if you're a West Virginia fan, you're turning a keen eye and saying, Clemson could leave sooner than later. You already know they're unhappy. They voted against adding those new members, and what they wanted was completely put by the wayside. So you already know Clemson's not happy right now. You think, well, as the Big 12, the offensive now goes to Pitt, Louisville. Do I think Miami will be a Big 12 team? No. But I want us to close your eye. If you're driving, don't. Close your eyes for 1 second and picture in the Big 12, Miami. What if the Big 12 got a UNC in Miami? What if the Big 12 said, hey, look, we have settled for being number 3. We're third fiddle behind what the SEC and the Big 10 are able to do. We're building the power conference thing. If the ACC falls apart and it's Big 12, SEC, Big 10, at some point down the line here, the Big 12 has to compete to be a power conference. If it's a power 2, because the Big 10 and the SEC are making so much more money than the Big 12, then it's obvious what's going to happen. At some point, Big 12 teams that are profitable will move to those leagues. Big 12 teams that are saying, hey, we want more money, they're going to go to the SEC. They're going to go to the Big 10. If the Big 12 wants to compete as a big dog, we've already accepted they cannot be the Big 10, they cannot be the SEC. But what if we get off of that horse? What if we get into hey, there's a door here? If you're Brett Yormark, I think you got to call. You got to make that call. You've got to go so offensive to a Miami, to a UNC, which, again, I know that every source, I don't think it's going to happen. Every source has told you those teams are going to the Big 10. They're going to the SEC. And I think that's true. We're kind of waiting on that to happen. The day is coming. I do believe that sooner than later, as the report says, the day is coming. But what happens 10 years down the line from that? What happens if the Big 12 gets Pitt and Louisville, but the biggest 4 or 5 teams from the ACC go to the SEC and the Big 10? And those two conferences are bringing in $85-90 million per team. And the Big 12 is sitting at 40-45. Again, this being in 2036. Then what? You think that the top teams in the Big 12 are going to sit around and let those teams make $30-40 more million? I don't think so. So now if you're Brett Yormark, you have to find ways to attack, to bring in big brands, to bring in big money in football. Not UConn, not Gonzaga, in football. What does Clemson leaving the ACC do for the Big 12? Well, it means that Florida State's right with them, UNC is right with them, and with that comes NC State. It comes Miami, it comes Duke, it comes Virginia Tech. That whole conference is going to fall apart, and when it does, if you're Brett Yormark, you can't just settle. You can't just say, oh, we'll take Louisville and Pitt, we'll be good. Because in 2036, that's not going to behoove you. When two conferences are making nearly double what the Big 12 is making, which I'm not guaranteeing that to be a thing, but I'm worried it'll become that way. I'm worried when every week in the Big 10 is a top 10 matchup. Oh, I don't know. Every week in the SEC there's 3 top 10 matchups. Oh, that's going to be tough. That's hyperbolic to an extent. Obviously, you wouldn't get that much weight at the top, but man, be a whole lot of people watching that over the Big 12, which would stink. You know what else stinks? This cold. Come back tomorrow. Hopefully I'll have less of a cold. Let's beat the books. I don't feel good. Did a podcast, though. Thank you for listening. 10,000 subscribers. This is Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.